the movement towards safer food has seen several incarnations. Consumers and scientists continue to look for ways to improve our diets by reducing or eliminating foods that can cause health problems. More recently, organic and locally grown foods have gained popularity. Yet throughout these iterations, we have overlooked the fact that hazardous minerals like cadmium and other heavy metals can be added to our food simply because farmers may be using crop nutrients that contain these impurities, even with organic fertilisation.
On average, our farmers take very well care about the soil because it's a huge capital. Most of the capital they have is in the land. The problem though is that the farmers do not know so much about what pollutants are.
Governments, concerned about the health of their citizens, have responded to this demand, looking for sensible regulatory tools to help remove dangerous elements from being introduced into the food chain.
So actually we're standing here in the sample archive at Rothamsted. We have 170 years time scale of samples here, and there are all kinds of things like soil samples, fertilizer samples, manures, crop samples of different types. Here in the sample archive, it's interesting, I think, to talk about nutrients and also about contaminants.
Some heavy metals that are found in phosphate fertilisers, like cadmium, lead, arsenic, mercury and hexavalent chromium, are highly poisonous.
Well, heavy metals is a chemical term, not a musical one.
Excessive cadmium is not a good thing. In general, you could say cadmium is not desirable at all. It serves no useful purpose. It tends to stay in the body for a long time, so on average 10 to 20 years. So once you've taken in cadmium, it really stays there for a long time. And of course, the more cadmium you take, the higher your levels of cadmium rise.
All soils would have a low level of cadmium coming from the original rocks and minerals, you know. But then there is the other issue is that even soils which have a kind of a low background level, if you like, can gradually be enriched with cadmium. People come along with fertilizers. If your fertilizer is made from materials that naturally contain cadmium, that goes through into the fertilizers. And as you apply that to the soil on a regular basis, then the cadmium in the soil builds up, and that can actually move quite freely into foodstuffs, so it's quite mobile.
The most prominent sign of cadmium toxicity is, first of all, the kidney. It disrupts your kidney function and will, if it's at high doses prolonged, can lead to kidney failure. And if you're talking very high levels of cadmium ingested, then it can disrupt your bone metabolism, so you get bone disease.
For me, it should go back to the beginning, which is the production of the fertilizer. And if you get the quality right, then in a sense you can't go wrong in the food chain. You know, if we control it from the start, we're going to have the right quality of food.
It is important to focus on the quality and purity of the raw materials that are mined and used for the phosphate nutrient group to ensure we protect our food supply and avoid introducing contaminants.
The Chinese symbol of soil is a very relevant one. The symbol for soil is that where the plant grows on. Literally, it's a symbol of a plant growing on something. That something is the soil. So whatever you put in the soil will eventually, to a larger or smaller extent, end up in the plant. We've been discussing cadmium for many decades. EFSA, it's the European Food Safety Association, discussed that what is believed to be safe intake, these levels have been reduced because new scientific insights showed that at current exposure levels, it cannot be ruled out that children and adults will have chronic effects due to cadmium accumulation.
Proposed EU regulations are currently focused on establishing maximum limits for cadmium and other heavy metals in phosphate fertilizers. Regarding cadmium, the proposition is to introduce progressive limits, starting with a maximum of 60 mg per kilogram P2O5 to 40 mg per kilogram P2O5 to 20 mg per kilogram P2O5 over a defined number of years.
If we want to safeguard our children's future, our food supply for the next generations, then we simply cannot go on loading the soils with many unwanted substances, including cadmium.
And especially on the longer term, that is a major concern. Once you have these pollutants in the soil, it is very difficult to get rid of them.
If we continue doing this without considering the long-term consequences, we're going to run into big problems.